The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered timber station, and Sarah Ramsey gripped the edge of her seat with trembling fingers, knowing that somewhere beyond that dusty window stood the man she was promised to marry, but had never met. She smoothed down the wrinkled fabric of her only good dress, the blue calico that had seen better days back in Philadelphia, and tried to calm the wild beating of her heart. The journey from Pennsylvania to Eureka Springs, Arkansas had taken nearly 3 weeks, and every mile had brought her closer to the moment she now faced with equal parts hope and terror. The letter her cousin had helped her respond to had promised a good man, a rancher who needed a wife, someone kind and honest who would provide for her. What the letter had not revealed was Sarah's deepest shame, the secret she had carried since childhood, unable to share it with anyone except her cousin who had passed away just months before Sarah departed. She could not read or write. The stagecoach driver opened the door, extending a weathered hand to help her down. Sarah gathered her small carpet bag, the sum total of her worldly possessions, and stepped onto the dusty main street of Eureka Springs. The Arkansas sun beat down mercilessly on this August afternoon in 1878, and she raised one hand to shield her eyes from the glare. "Miss Ramsey." A deep voice cut through the noise of the bustling street. Sarah turned and found herself looking up at a tall man with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of warm honey. He held his hat in his hands, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who spent his days outdoors. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps 26 or 27 to her own 22 years, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am Sarah Ramsey." "Quincy Foster," he said, and his lips curved into a gentle smile that reached his eyes. "I am pleased to finally meet you, Miss Ramsey. Your letters were mighty fine." Guilt twisted in Sarah's stomach like a knife. Those letters had been written by her cousin Margaret, who had carefully crafted responses to this stranger's advertisements based on what Sarah had told her to say. Margaret had been the only person who knew Sarah's secret, the only one who had never judged her for it. "Thank you for arranging my passage," Sarah said, focusing on keeping her voice steady. "It was a long journey." "I imagine it was," Quincy said, his voice kind. "Let me get your trunk loaded onto the wagon. My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town." "It is not much, but it is home, and I hope you will find it comfortable." "I am sure I will," Sarah said, though her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together in front of her dress. Quincy retrieved her battered trunk from the stagecoach driver and hefted it easily onto the back of a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient horses. He offered his hand to help Sarah up onto the wooden seat, and she was grateful for the steadiness of his grip as she climbed aboard. The leather reins rested loosely in his capable hands as he settled beside her, and with a gentle click of his tongue, he set the horses in motion. They rode in silence for the first mile, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of hooves on the hard, packed dirt road. Sarah stole glances at the man beside her, trying to reconcile the reality with the image she had built in her mind during those long weeks of travel. He seemed kind, patient even, but what would happen when he discovered the truth about her? "I should tell you," Quincy said suddenly, breaking the silence, "that I live alone on the ranch. My parents passed several years back, and my sister married a shopkeeper in Little Rock. I have 2 ranch hands who help with the cattle and horses, but they have their own quarters near the barn. The house itself is modest, but I have made preparations for your arrival." "That sounds perfectly fine," Sarah said, her throat tight with anxiety. Every word he spoke reminded her of the deception she was perpetuating, even if it had not been entirely of her own making. "I want you to know," Quincy continued, his eyes on the road ahead, "that I do not expect anything from you right away. I know this situation is unusual, and I want you to feel comfortable. We can take our time getting to know each other properly before we make any formal arrangements with the preacher." Relief flooded through Sarah like cool water on a hot day. "I appreciate that, Mr. Foster. Please call me Quincy," he said, glancing at her with those warm, honey-colored eyes. "We are to be married, after all, or at least I hope we will be. Formality seems unnecessary between us." "Then you must call me Sarah," she replied, managing a genuine smile for the first time since stepping off the stagecoach. The ranch came into view as they crested a gentle hill, and Sarah caught her breath at the sight. A modest but well-maintained house sat nestled among a grove of oak trees, with a large barn and several outbuildings scattered across the property. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could see the glint of water from what appeared to be a creek running along the eastern boundary of the land. "It is beautiful," Sarah said, and she meant it. After growing up in the cramped tenements of Philadelphia, the open space and natural beauty of the Arkansas countryside felt like stepping into a different world entirely. Quincy's face brightened at her words. "I am glad you think so. My father built this place with his own hands, and I have tried to maintain it as he would have wanted. The land is good for cattle, and we have been fortunate these past few years." He helped Sarah down from the wagon and carried her trunk toward the house. The front door opened onto a simple but clean interior, with a main room that served as both kitchen and sitting area, a large stone fireplace dominating one wall, and two doors that presumably led to bedrooms. "I have prepared the larger bedroom for you," Quincy said, setting her trunk down near one of the doors. "I will take the smaller one. There is water in the pitcher for washing, and I will give you some time to settle in before supper." Sarah stepped into the bedroom and found it neat and thoughtfully arranged, with a quilt on the bed that looked handmade, a simple dresser, and a small table with a kerosene lamp. The window looked out over the pastures, and the late afternoon sun cast golden light across the wooden floor. She closed the door and sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling in her lap. What was she going to do? Eventually, Quincy would expect her to read something, to write a letter, to help with accounts or correspondence. How long could she hide the truth before he discovered that she was not the educated woman her letters had suggested? A gentle knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. "Sarah," Quincy's voice came through the wood. "I forgot to mention that there are some books on the shelf in the main room if you would like something to read while you settle in. I know you mentioned in your letters that you enjoyed reading." Sarah's heart sank. "Thank you," she called back, her voice sounding hollow to her own ears. She heard his footsteps retreat, and she pressed her hands to her face. This was impossible. She could not keep up this pretense, but the thought of confessing filled her with shame and fear. What if he sent her back? What if he was angry at being deceived? She had nowhere else to go. No family left in Philadelphia. No money for passage back east even if she wanted to return to the city where she had spent her childhood scrubbing floors and taking in laundry to survive. Sarah forced herself to stand and unpack her meager belongings, hanging her two other dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the dresser. When she could delay no longer, she washed her face and hands in the basin and ventured out into the main room. Quincy stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot that smelled heavenly. He had changed into a clean shirt, and his hair was damp as if he had also washed up. "I hope you like stew," he said, glancing over his shoulder with a smile. "I am afraid my cooking is not fancy, but it is filling." "I am sure it will be wonderful," Sarah said, moving to the table. "Can I help with anything?" "Just have a seat and rest," Quincy said. "You have had a long journey and I imagine you are exhausted." As he ladled stew into bowls and set them on the table with thick slices of bread, Sarah found herself studying him more closely. There was a gentleness to his movements, a care in how he did things that suggested a thoughtful nature. When he sat down across from her, he bowed his head briefly before eating, and Sarah followed suit, offering a silent prayer for guidance in the mess she found herself in. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Quincy said as they ate. "Your letters mention the city, but I would love to hear more about it from you directly. I have never been farther east than St. Louis." Sarah relaxed slightly as she talked about the crowded streets, the factories, the endless noise and bustle of city life. She spoke of the market vendors and the wealthy neighborhoods she had glimpsed while working as a maid, though she carefully omitted the harder truths of her existence there. Quincy listened with genuine interest, asking questions and seeming fascinated by details that seemed mundane to her. "It sounds overwhelming," he admitted. "I prefer the quiet out here, the space to think and breathe, but I imagine it had its charms." "Not as many as you might think," Sarah said quietly. "Life was hard there, especially for someone alone with no family." Quincy's expression softened. "You mentioned in your letters that you were an orphan. I am sorry for your losses." "Thank you," Sarah said. "Your advertisement offered hope when I had very little of it left." "I am glad you responded," Quincy said, his honey-colored eyes warm in the lamplight. "I will admit, I was nervous about this arrangement. Finding a wife through correspondence seemed like a gamble, but your letters showed intelligence and kindness. I felt like I was getting to know someone I could build a life with." The guilt twisted deeper in Sarah's chest, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "I was nervous too. I still am, if I am being honest." "That is understandable," Quincy said. "This is a strange situation for both of us, but I meant what I said earlier. We can take our time. I would like us to be friends first, to build trust between us before we make any permanent commitments." After supper, Quincy showed Sarah around the ranch, pointing out the barn where the horses were stabled, the chicken coop, and the smokehouse. The two ranch hands he had mentioned were nowhere to be seen, apparently having finished their work for the day and retired to their quarters. "I usually rise early to tend to the animals and check on the herd," Quincy explained as they walked back toward the house in the gathering dusk. "You can sleep as late as you like, but I would enjoy your company at breakfast if you are inclined to join me." "I am used to waking early," Sarah said. "I will be happy to prepare breakfast for you." Quincy shook his head. "You are not here to be my servant, Sarah. We will share the work between us, as partners should." The word partners sent a flutter through Sarah's chest, equal parts hope and fear. When they returned to the house, Quincy lit the lamps and then excused himself to his own room, wishing her a good night with genuine warmth. Sarah lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the Arkansas night through her open window. Crickets chirped, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. The air smelled of grass and earth and freedom, so different from the coal smoke and garbage of Philadelphia. Despite her anxiety about the secret she carried, she felt a small spark of something she had not experienced in years: possibility. The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of Quincy moving around in the main room. She dressed quickly and emerged to find him stoking the fire in the stove, preparing coffee. "Good morning," he said, his face brightening when he saw her. "I hope the rooster did not wake you too early." "Not at all," Sarah said. "I told you I am used to early mornings. Please let me help." They worked together to prepare breakfast, and Sarah found the rhythm of it comfortable, almost natural. Quincy was easy to be around, never demanding or harsh, always patient and kind in his manner. As they sat down to eat eggs and bacon with fresh bread, he mentioned that he needed to ride out to check on a section of fence that afternoon. "You are welcome to come along if you would like to see more of the ranch," he offered. "Or you can stay here and rest, make yourself at home. Whatever you prefer." "I would like to come," Sarah said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Quincy's smile was immediate and genuine. "I am glad. I will saddle 2 horses after we finish the morning chores." The morning passed quickly as Sarah learned the routine of the ranch. She gathered eggs from the chicken coop, helped Quincy feed the horses, and even tried her hand at milking the cow, though her efforts were clumsy and made Quincy laugh in a way that was gentle rather than mocking. "You will get the hang of it," he assured her. "Everything takes practice." When they rode out across the ranch land, Sarah on a gentle mare named Daisy, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. The Arkansas countryside stretched out in rolling hills and green pastures, the sky impossibly blue overhead. Quincy pointed out landmarks and explained the workings of the ranch, his pride in the land evident in every word. "My father used to say that land will give you what you put into it," Quincy said as they rode. "If you care for it properly, it will sustain you. I have tried to honor that philosophy." "He sounds like he was a wise man," Sarah said. "He was," Quincy agreed, a hint of sadness crossing his features. "I miss him and my mother too. They would have liked you, I think. My mother especially would have been glad to see me settled down with a good woman." Sarah's chest tightened with the weight of her deception, but before she could dwell on it, Quincy pointed to a section of fence in the distance. "There," he said. "Some of the posts are loose. We should have it fixed before the cattle drift too far from this pasture." They spent the next hour working side by side, with Quincy showing Sarah how to hold the posts steady while he hammered them back into place. Her hands were soft from city life, unused to this kind of labor, but she did not complain even when blisters began to form. "You are working too hard," Quincy said, noticing her wince. "Let me see your hands." Reluctantly, Sarah held out her palms, revealing the red marks that were already forming. "I should have given you gloves," Quincy said, his voice apologetic. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and gently wrapped one of her hands. "We will head back to the house and get some salve on these. I am sorry, Sarah. I should have thought of this." "It is not your fault," Sarah protested. "I wanted to help." "And I appreciate it," Quincy said, his eyes meeting hers with warmth. "But I do not want you to hurt yourself. Your hands are too delicate for this rough work." The tenderness in his voice and touch made Sarah's heart beat faster. She realized, with some surprise, that she was beginning to care for this man she had known for less than a day. There was something about Quincy Foster that made her feel safe, valued in a way she had never experienced before. Back at the house, Quincy retrieved a tin of salve and carefully applied it to Sarah's hands, his touch gentle and sure. She watched his face as he worked, noting the concentration in his expression, the care he took not to cause her any additional pain. "There," he said finally. "That should help them heal. Try to take it easy for the rest of the day." "Thank you," Sarah said softly. "You are very kind, Quincy." He looked up at her, and for a moment something passed between them, an awareness that made Sarah catch her breath. Then Quincy cleared his throat and stood, putting the salve away with perhaps more attention than necessary. "I should check on the cattle in the north pasture," he said. "Will you be all right here on your own for a while?" "Of course," Sarah said. "I will start preparing supper." After Quincy left, Sarah explored the main room more carefully. Her eyes fell on the bookshelf he had mentioned, filled with volumes of varying sizes and conditions. She approached it slowly, running her fingers along the spines, wishing desperately that she could decipher the mysterious symbols embossed on them. What stories did they contain? What knowledge was locked away behind her inability to read? She pulled one book down and opened it carefully, staring at the incomprehensible marks on the pages. They might as well have been hieroglyphics for all the sense they made to her. Frustration and shame welled up inside her, and she quickly replaced the book on the shelf. That evening, as they sat down to the simple meal Sarah had prepared, Quincy mentioned that there was a town dance coming up in 2 weeks. "It is a monthly gathering," he explained. "Most of the ranchers and townspeople attend. It would be a good opportunity for you to meet the neighbors and make some friends. There are several other women your age who I think you would enjoy knowing." "That sounds nice," Sarah said, though the thought of meeting new people and potentially being exposed made her nervous. "I thought maybe before then we could go into town one afternoon and get you some fabric for a new dress," Quincy continued. "I want you to have something special to wear." "You do not need to do that," Sarah protested. "I have my dresses." "I want to," Quincy insisted. "Please, Sarah. Let me do this for you." The genuine desire in his eyes to please her was touching, and Sarah found herself nodding. "Thank you. That is very generous." The days settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah woke early with Quincy, and they worked together on the ranch chores. She was learning quickly, her hands growing stronger and more capable with each passing day. Quincy was an excellent teacher, patient and encouraging, never making her feel foolish for not knowing something. 3 days after her arrival, they made the trip into Eureka Springs for supplies. The town was bustling with activity, and Sarah felt overwhelmed by the curious glances of the townspeople who clearly knew exactly who she was. "Do not mind them," Quincy said quietly, keeping close to her side. "Small town folk are curious by nature, but they mean no harm." At the general store, Quincy introduced Sarah to the proprietor, a jovial man named Mr. Henderson, and his wife. Mrs. Henderson immediately took Sarah under her wing, showing her the selection of fabrics and chattering away about the upcoming dance. "You must come to the quilting circle on Thursday afternoons," Mrs. Henderson insisted. "All the young women in the area attend. It is a wonderful way to make friends." Sarah agreed, though her stomach churned with anxiety. How would she manage in a group of women who likely all knew how to read and write? Quincy purchased a beautiful length of deep green fabric that brought out the color in Sarah's eyes, along with thread and trim for the dress. As they loaded their supplies into the wagon, a well-dressed couple approached them on the street. "Quincy Foster," the man called out. "Is this the bride we have been hearing about, Sarah Ramsey?" Quincy said, his hand coming to rest gently on the small of Sarah's back. "Sarah, this is Martin and Elizabeth Crawford. They own the ranch to the east of ours." Elizabeth Crawford was a handsome woman of about 35, with sharp eyes that seemed to assess Sarah in a single glance. "How delightful to meet you, Miss Ramsey. You must come to tea soon so we can get properly acquainted." "That would be lovely," Sarah said, managing a polite smile despite her discomfort under the woman's scrutiny. As they drove back to the ranch, Quincy was quieter than usual. Finally, he said, "Elizabeth Crawford is known for being a bit particular. Do not let her intimidate you." "I will try not to," Sarah said, appreciating his protectiveness. That evening, as Sarah sat by the fire attempting to mend one of Quincy's shirts, he settled into the chair across from her with a book. She watched from the corner of her eye as he opened it and began to read, his expression relaxed and content. The lamplight played across his features, and Sarah felt a pang of longing, not just for the ability to read but for the easy companionship that literacy seemed to represent. "Sarah," Quincy said suddenly, looking up from his book, "I have been meaning to ask. Would you like to write to anyone back east? Let them know you arrived safely. I go into town regularly and could post letters for you." Sarah's hands stilled on the fabric. "There is no one left to write to," she said carefully, which was true enough. "My cousin who helped arrange this was my last living relative, and she passed away before I left Philadelphia." "I am sorry," Quincy said gently. "That must have been difficult to lose her and then make this journey all alone." "It was," Sarah admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "But I am grateful to be here." "I am grateful you are here too," Quincy said, and the warmth in his voice made Sarah look up to meet his eyes. What she saw there made her breath catch. Genuine affection, growing deeper with each day they spent together. That night, lying in her bed, Sarah knew she could not continue this deception. Quincy was falling for her, just as she was falling for him, and the foundation of their relationship was built on a lie. She had to tell him the truth, no matter the consequences. The next morning, Sarah woke with determination settling heavy in her chest. She found Quincy in the barn, grooming one of the horses, and her courage almost failed her at the sight of his easy smile when he saw her. "Good morning," he said. "I was thinking we might ride out to the creek today. It is beautiful there and the weather is perfect." "Quincy," Sarah said, her voice shaking, "I need to tell you something important." His smile faded, replaced by concern. He set down the brush and gave her his full attention. "What is it? Are you unwell?" "No, it is nothing like that," Sarah said, twisting her hands together. "But I have not been honest with you, and I cannot continue this way any longer." Quincy's expression became guarded, and Sarah saw fear flash in his eyes. "Go on." Sarah took a deep breath, forcing the words out before her courage deserted her entirely. "Those letters you received from me, the ones that convinced you I was educated and intelligent. I did not write them. My cousin Margaret wrote them for me, based on what I told her to say." "I cannot read or write, Quincy. I never learned how. I cannot read any of those books on your shelf. I cannot help you with accounts or correspondence. I have been living a lie since the moment I arrived, and I am so sorry." The silence that followed felt endless. Quincy's face was unreadable as he processed her confession, and Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "I understand if you want to send me away," she continued, her voice breaking. "I do not have anywhere to go, but I will figure something out. I just could not keep deceiving you when you have been nothing but kind to me." Quincy was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was choosing his words carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle rather than angry. "Why did you not tell me before?" "I was ashamed," Sarah whispered, "and afraid. In Philadelphia, not being able to read meant you could only get the worst jobs, that people looked down on you. I thought if you knew, you would not want me." "Come here," Quincy said, and when Sarah hesitated, he crossed the distance between them himself. He took both her hands in his, looking down into her face with those warm, honey eyes. "I am not going to send you away, Sarah. Yes, I am surprised, and I wish you had told me sooner. But I understand why you did not." "You do?" Sarah asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Life is hard for everyone in different ways," Quincy said. "Not knowing how to read is not something to be ashamed of. It just means you never had the opportunity to learn. That can be fixed." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. Quincy's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Then I'll teach you." Sarah stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want to teach me to read? Why not?" Quincy said. "I can read and write well enough. My mother was a school teacher before she married my father, and she made sure I had a good education. I may not be as skilled a teacher as she was, but I can certainly help you learn your letters." "But why would you do that for me?" Sarah asked, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "After I lied to you. Because I care about you," Quincy said simply. "These past few days, getting to know you, the real you, not just words on paper, I have come to care for you deeply, Sarah. You are kind, hardworking, brave enough to travel across the country to start a new life. The fact that you cannot read does not change any of that." Sarah could not help herself. She threw her arms around Quincy's neck, sobbing into his shoulder as relief and gratitude overwhelmed her. After a moment of surprise, his arms came around her, holding her close as she cried. "Thank you," she whispered against his shirt. "Thank you for understanding." "We will get through this together," Quincy said, his hand gently stroking her back. "I promise." When Sarah finally pulled back, wiping at her eyes, Quincy kept one arm around her shoulders. "We can start today if you like," he said. "After the morning chores are done, we can have our first lesson." That afternoon, they sat together at the kitchen table, and Quincy pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. He wrote out the alphabet in careful letters, saying each one aloud as he did so. "These are the building blocks of everything written," he explained. "Once you know these, you can start to put them together into words." Sarah stared at the letters, trying to commit them to memory. Quincy was patient, going over each one multiple times, having her trace the shapes with her finger until she could identify several of them on sight. "You are doing wonderfully," he encouraged after an hour of practice. "This is excellent progress for a first lesson." "It is so much harder than I thought it would be," Sarah admitted. "How do people remember all of this?" "Practice," Quincy said. "The same way you learn to gather eggs without breaking them or milk the cow. It takes time and repetition, but I promise you will get there." They fell into a new routine. Every afternoon, after the main work of the day was done, they would sit together for reading lessons. Quincy proved to be a natural teacher, patient and creative in his methods. He would write out words for things around the house, helping Sarah connect the abstract letters to concrete objects she could see and touch. Within a week, Sarah could recognize and write her own name, a feat that filled her with such pride she nearly cried when she successfully formed the letters on her own for the first time. "Look at that," Quincy said, his voice full of warmth. "Sarah Ramsey, written by Sarah Ramsey herself." "I still cannot believe I am actually learning," Sarah said, staring at her name on the paper. "You are doing more than learning," Quincy said. "You are excelling. I am proud of you, Sarah." His words filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Each day, she found herself falling more deeply for this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who saw her struggles not as weaknesses but as opportunities to help. The day of the town dance arrived, and Sarah wore the green dress she had spent the past week sewing with help from Mrs. Henderson, who had indeed welcomed her warmly at the quilting circle. The other women had been friendly, though Sarah had carefully avoided any activities that required reading. Quincy's eyes lit up when Sarah emerged from her bedroom in the finished dress, her hair pinned up in a style Mrs. Henderson had shown her. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice soft with admiration. "Thank you," Sarah said, feeling her cheeks warm. "You look very handsome yourself." He had dressed in his best clothes, a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his hair neatly combed. When he offered his arm, Sarah took it, feeling for all the world like a proper lady heading to a ball. The dance was held in the town hall, and it seemed like everyone from miles around had turned out for it. A small band played lively music, and the room was filled with laughter and conversation. Quincy introduced Sarah to what felt like dozens of people, and she tried her best to remember all their names. When the dancing started, Quincy led Sarah onto the floor. She had never learned formal dances, but he guided her through the steps with patience, his hand warm and steady at her waist. "You are a natural," he said as they moved together. "Or you are a very good leader," Sarah replied, smiling up at him. As the night wore on, Sarah noticed Elizabeth Crawford watching them from across the room, her expression thoughtful. When the current dance ended, Elizabeth approached them directly. "Miss Ramsey, might I have a word?" she asked, her tone making it clear this was not really a request. Quincy's jaw tightened, but Sarah placed a hand on his arm. "It is all right," she said quietly before following Elizabeth to a quieter corner of the hall. "I will be direct with you, Miss Ramsey," Elizabeth said. "There has been talk in town about you. You come from Philadelphia with no references, no family, nothing but the clothes on your back. Some people are questioning your character." Sarah felt her face flush with anger and humiliation. "I assure you, Mrs. Crawford, my character is sound. I may not come from wealth, but I am honest and hardworking." "I believe you," Elizabeth said, surprising Sarah. "I just wanted to warn you that not everyone will be so accepting. Quincy Foster is well liked in this community and people are protective of him. You will need to prove yourself to them." "I intend to," Sarah said, lifting her chin. "Not because I need their approval, but because I care about Quincy and do not want to cause him any trouble." Something like respect flickered in Elizabeth's eyes. "Good. He deserves someone with backbone. I think you might just do right by him after all." When Sarah returned to Quincy's side, he immediately asked, "What did she say to you?" "Just warning me that I need to prove myself to the town," Sarah said, "which is fair enough. I am a stranger here." "You do not need to prove anything to anyone," Quincy said firmly. "Anyone who matters will see what a good person you are just by knowing you." His fierce defense of her made Sarah's heart swell. As they danced again, she rested her head against his shoulder, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. On the ride home, under a sky full of stars, Quincy was unusually quiet. Finally, as they neared the ranch, he pulled the wagon to a stop. "Sarah," he said, turning to face her, "I know we agreed to take our time getting to know each other, and we have only known each other a few weeks. But I need you to know something." "What is it?" Sarah asked, her heart beginning to race. "I am falling in love with you," Quincy said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I started falling for you the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, and every day since has only made it stronger. I know about your inability to read before we met, and it does not change how I feel. If anything, watching you work so hard to learn has made me admire you even more." Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too, Quincy. You have shown me such kindness, such patience. You make me want to be better, to try harder." "You do not need to be anything other than exactly who you are," Quincy said. He reached out and gently cupped her face with one hand. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. Quincy leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Sarah met him halfway. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope for their future. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I think we should set a date for the wedding," Quincy said. "If you are willing, that is. I do not want to wait any longer to make you my wife properly." "I am willing," Sarah said. "More than willing." They decided on a date 6 weeks away, giving Sarah time to continue her reading lessons and to prepare properly for the ceremony. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of joy. Sarah threw herself into her lessons with renewed determination, wanting to be able to read her own marriage vows when the time came. Quincy was endlessly patient, celebrating every small victory with her. When she successfully read her first complete sentence, he swept her up and spun her around the kitchen, both of them laughing like children. "I am so proud of you," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "You are going to be reading novels before you know it." "One step at a time," Sarah said, but she was beaming. The world was opening up to her in ways she had never imagined possible, and it was all because of the man who held her in his arms. Mrs. Henderson helped Sarah sew a wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation in cream-colored cotton. The other women from the quilting circle contributed lace and ribbon, welcoming Sarah into their community with genuine warmth. Even Elizabeth Crawford softened toward her, offering the use of her garden for the wedding reception. The night before the wedding, as Sarah practiced writing her vows for what felt like the 100th time, Quincy sat across from her, watching with undisguised affection. "You know," he said, "even if you had never learned to read, I would still love you just as much." "I know," Sarah said, looking up from her paper, "but I wanted to do this for myself too, not just for you. I wanted to prove that I could." "And you have," Quincy said. "You have proved that you can do anything you set your mind to." The wedding took place on a beautiful September afternoon, with half the town in attendance. Sarah wore her cream dress with wildflowers in her hair, and her hands trembled only slightly as she read the vows she had written herself. "I promise to stand by your side through all of life's challenges," she read carefully, her eyes occasionally flicking to Quincy's face for encouragement. "To work alongside you, to learn from you, and to love you with all my heart for as long as I live. You saw past my shame to the person I could become, and for that, I will be forever grateful." There were tears in Quincy's eyes as he spoke his own vows, promising to cherish and protect her, to be her partner in all things. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quincy kissed her tenderly, and the assembled crowd erupted in applause. The reception in the Crawford garden was lively and joyful. Sarah danced with her new husband until her feet ached, surrounded by people who had become friends and neighbors. Mrs. Henderson hugged her warmly, whispering, "You are exactly what Quincy needed. I am so happy for you both." That night, when they finally returned home as husband and wife, Quincy carried Sarah over the threshold of what was now truly their shared home. He set her down gently in the bedroom they would now share, and she looked up at him with love and trust shining in her eyes. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Sarah whispered as Quincy gently unpinned her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. "Neither did I," Quincy said. "But here we are." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a celebration of the love they had built together over the past months. Afterward, as they lay in each other's arms, Quincy traced lazy patterns on Sarah's shoulder. "I have been thinking," he said, "about expanding the ranch, maybe getting some more land to the south. We could build it into something really substantial, something to pass on to our children someday." "Children," Sarah said, the word filling her with warmth. "I would like that very much." "So would I," Quincy said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "A whole houseful of them if we are blessed that way." The months that followed were the happiest of Sarah's life. She continued her reading lessons, progressing to simple books and then more complex ones. Quincy taught her arithmetic too, and soon she was helping him with the ranch accounts, taking pride in her ability to contribute in this new way. Their love deepened with each passing day. They worked side by side on the ranch, built a life together filled with laughter and purpose. When winter came, they spent long evenings by the fire, Sarah reading aloud while Quincy mended tack or carved small wooden figures. In the spring, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Quincy's joy was boundless, and he became even more protective and attentive than before. He insisted she rest more, do less of the heavy work, though Sarah protested that she was perfectly healthy. "I just want to make sure you and the baby are safe," he said, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "You are both so precious to me." "We are going to be fine," Sarah assured him. "I am stronger than I look." She was right. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and on a cold January morning in 1880, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's honey-colored eyes and a shock of dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Quincy's father. Quincy was a devoted father from the very first moment, cradling his son with a tenderness that made Sarah fall in love with him all over again. Late at night, when Thomas would wake crying, Quincy would often be the one to get up and walk the floor with him, singing soft lullabies until the baby settled. "You are going to spoil him," Sarah teased one night, watching from the bed as Quincy rocked their son. "That is my right as a father," Quincy said with a grin. "Besides, look at this face. How could anyone not want to spoil him?" As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Sarah continued to improve her reading and writing. She began keeping a journal, documenting their daily life, the growth of their son, the expansion of the ranch. Writing became a source of joy for her, a way to capture and preserve the happiness she had found. When Thomas was 2, Sarah became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin girls in the summer of 1882. They named them Margaret, after Sarah's beloved cousin, and Hannah, after Quincy's mother. The house was suddenly full of noise and chaos, but it was the good kind, the kind that came from a family built on love. Quincy hired additional help for the ranch so he could spend more time with his growing family. He taught Thomas to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and the sight of father and son together on horseback never failed to make Sarah smile. The girls were only 6 months old when Sarah realized she was pregnant yet again. This time, she gave birth to another boy, whom they named Samuel. Quincy joked that they were working on building their own small army, but the love in his eyes every time he looked at their children was unmistakable. Through it all, Sarah and Quincy's love for each other never wavered. They still made time for each other, still had their evening reading sessions even with children underfoot, still stole moments alone whenever they could. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Quincy presented Sarah with a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For your writing," he said. "I thought you might like something special to keep your thoughts in." Sarah opened it to find the first page already inscribed in Quincy's neat handwriting. "To my beloved wife, Sarah, you have given me everything I ever dreamed of and more. All my love always, Quincy." Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she read the words, still marveling that she could do so. "It is perfect," she said. "Thank you." That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah made the first entry in her new journal. She wrote about their journey together, from the frightened woman who stepped off the stagecoach to the confident wife and mother she had become. She wrote about Quincy's kindness, his patience, the way he had seen her not as she was but as she could be. Years continued to pass in a blur of happiness. The ranch prospered under Quincy's careful management and Sarah's growing business acumen. They added more land, expanded their herd, built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Sarah became pregnant 2 more times, blessing them with another daughter, Rose, and finally a boy they named Quincy Jr. Sarah became a respected member of the community, known for her charity work and her efforts to help other women learn to read. She started a small school on the ranch, teaching ranch hands and their families basic literacy skills, paying forward the gift Quincy had given her. When their oldest son Thomas turned 18 in 1898, Quincy signed over a portion of the ranch to him, helping him establish his own place on the property. The pride in both men's eyes as they shook hands on the deal brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She and Quincy sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the Arkansas sky in shades of gold and pink. "Can you believe it has been 20 years?" Sarah asked, leaning against Quincy's shoulder. "Some days it feels like yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach," Quincy said, his arm coming around her. "Other days, I cannot imagine life without you. It is like you have always been here." "I have found everything I was looking for in this life," Sarah said. "Things I did not even know I needed. Love, family, purpose, respect. You gave me all of that. We gave it to each other, Quincy corrected gently. You worked just as hard as I did to build this life, Sarah. Never forget that. As the years continued to roll by, their family expanded further with grandchildren. Thomas married a sweet girl from town named Anna, and they gave Sarah and Quincy their first grandchild, a little girl named Sarah after her grandmother. Margaret married a neighboring rancher. Hannah became a teacher. Samuel took over more of the ranch operations. Rose married a banker from Little Rock, and Quincy Jr. decided to study law. Sarah and Quincy grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They would sit together on the porch in the evenings, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and marvel at the life they had built. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Sarah, now 64, and Quincy, now 68, sat at the head of a long table filled with 3 generations of their family. Thomas stood to make a toast. "To our parents," he said, raising his glass, "who showed us all what real love looks like, who built not just a ranch but a legacy, not just a house but a home. We are all blessed to be part of this family." "Hear, hear," the assembled crowd chorused. Later that night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Sarah and Quincy sat together in the bedroom that had been theirs for 40 years. Sarah was writing in a journal, one of dozens she had filled over the years. "What are you writing about tonight?" Quincy asked from where he sat on the edge of the bed, removing his boots. "About how grateful I am," Sarah said, "for every moment we have had together, for your patience when I was learning to read, for the life we have built, for our beautiful family." "Come here," Quincy said, and Sarah set down her pen and crossed to him. Even after all these years, his touch still made her heart flutter. He pulled her down to sit beside him on the bed, taking her hand in his. "You remember what I told you that day in the barn?" he asked. "When you confessed that you could not read, you said you would teach me," Sarah said softly. "I said more than that," Quincy reminded her. "I said I cared about you, that who you were mattered more than what you could or could not do. That is still true today, Sarah." After 40 years, 6 children, more grandchildren than I can sometimes keep track of, and a lifetime of adventures together, I love you more now than I did then. "I love you too," Sarah said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You changed my life, Quincy. You gave me everything." "No," Quincy said, cupping her face gently. "We changed each other's lives. We gave each other everything. That is what love is supposed to be." They sat together in the quiet of their room. 2 people who had started as strangers brought together by circumstance, and had built something beautiful through choice and commitment. Outside, the Arkansas night was alive with cricket song and the whisper of wind through the oak trees, the same sounds that had lulled them to sleep for 40 years. In the years that followed, as they entered their 70s, Sarah and Quincy began to slow down more noticeably. Samuel and his wife took over the full operation of the ranch, living in the main house while Sarah and Quincy moved to a smaller cottage on the property. It was all they needed, a cozy space with a good fireplace, comfortable chairs, and shelves full of books. Sarah still wrote in her journals every day, documenting the visits from grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the changing of the seasons, the memories that surfaced from their long life together. Her handwriting, once so painstakingly slow, now flowed easily across the pages. Quincy's health began to decline in his 75th year. Nothing dramatic, just the gradual wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. Sarah tended to him with the same care and devotion he had once shown her, reading to him from his favorite books, making sure he was comfortable. On a spring morning in 1926, Quincy woke before dawn and gently shook Sarah awake. "Come watch the sunrise with me," he said. Though it was early and she was tired, Sarah recognized something in his voice that made her agree without question. They wrapped themselves in blankets and sat on the porch of their cottage, watching as the sky gradually lightened and the sun began to peek over the horizon. "I have been thinking about something," Quincy said quietly, "about how lucky I am. I took a chance on a mail-order bride 48 years ago, and I got so much more than I ever could have imagined. I got a partner, a best friend, the mother of my children, the love of my life." "I was the lucky one," Sarah said, taking his hand. "You saw past my shame and my fear. You gave me the tools to change my life, but more than that, you gave me love. Real, unconditional love." "Promise me something," Quincy said, turning to look at her with those honey-colored eyes that age had not dimmed. "Promise me you'll keep writing, keep telling our story, keep sharing what you have learned with others." "I promise," Sarah said, though tears were streaming down her face because she understood what he was really saying. "But you have to promise me something too. Promise me you will fight to stay with me as long as you can." "Always," Quincy said. "For as long as I can, I will be right here beside you." Quincy held on for 3 more years, living to the age of 78 and seeing the birth of his first great-great-grandchild. When he finally passed peacefully in his sleep on a winter night in 1929, Sarah held his hand, whispering words of love until his last breath. The grief was immense, a physical weight that threatened to crush her. For days after the funeral, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, Sarah could barely function. It was Thomas who found her sitting in Quincy's favorite chair, clutching one of his shirts and sobbing. "He loved you so much, Mama," Thomas said, kneeling beside her. "And you loved him. That love did not end just because he is gone. It lives on in all of us in this ranch, in everything you built together." Sarah nodded, unable to speak, but her son's words penetrated the fog of grief. Slowly, day by day, she began to find her way forward. She started writing again, this time compiling her journals into a cohesive story, the story of a frightened young woman and the kind cowboy who had changed her life. She lived for 6 more years, surrounded by the love of her large family, still teaching reading to anyone who wanted to learn, still tending the small garden Quincy had planted for her decades ago. On her 80th birthday in 1935, her children presented her with a bound copy of her manuscript, which they had arranged to have published. "The Story of Sarah and Quincy Foster," the title page read. "A testament to love, patience, and the transformative power of education." Sarah held the book with trembling hands, tears streaming down her weathered face. She thought about that young woman who had stepped off the stage coach so many years ago, unable to read her own name, and marveled at how far she had come. "I wish he could see this," she whispered. "He knows, Mama," Margaret said gently. "Wherever he is, he knows, and he is proud of you." Sarah passed away peacefully in her sleep just a few months later, on a spring morning very much like the one where she had watched that final sunrise with Quincy. Her family found her with a smile on her face, her hand resting on the published book of her life story. They buried her beside Quincy under the oak trees on the ranch, and on the shared headstone, they carved the words that had changed Sarah's life all those years ago. "Then I'll teach you." The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, and Sarah's book was passed down through generations, a reminder of where they had come from and the love that had founded their family. The little school Sarah had started continued to operate, teaching literacy to anyone who needed it, keeping alive the mission that had been so important to her. In the end, Sarah and Quincy's story was exactly what it had always been, a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to the importance of seeing people not just as they are but as they can be, and to the truth that it is never too late to learn, to grow, or to find the happiness you deserve. From a chance beginning on a dusty street in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, they had built a legacy that would endure for generations, all because one kind cowboy had looked at a frightened young woman and said the words that would change both their lives forever. "Then I'll teach you."